Dr. HFY pressed his four-fingered hand against the cool metal wall of Sanctuary 7 and tried not to think about the bodies floating outside in space. The medical station had run out of storage room 3 days ago, and now the dead drifted in neat rows beyond the viewing ports, like some horrible constellation. His blue-scaled skin felt cold, despite the station's perfect temperature control, and his gill slits fluttered with anxiety as he watched another transport ship dock with more dying passengers. The Crimson Decay had started small, just 2 weeks ago on the mining colony of Zerion Prime. The first reports described a simple skin rash that turned deep red before spreading across the victim's body. Within hours, the rash became something much worse as it began breaking down cellular walls and turning healthy tissue into liquid. The Caltharian medical teams had seen nothing like it in their 3,000 years of advanced medicine, and every treatment they tried only seemed to make the disease spread faster. Now, 17 different alien species were dying from the same mysterious ailment, and nobody knew why or how to stop it. Dr. HFY had worked without sleep for 60 straight hours, trying every known cure in the galactic medical database, but nothing worked. The disease seemed to laugh at their most powerful medicines and their most advanced technology. Ships arrived every few hours, carrying hundreds of infected beings from across the galaxy, and all he could do was make them comfortable while they died. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead with a dirty rag and crawled out from under the air recycling unit he had been repairing. The human engineer had been working on Sanctuary 7 for 8 months now and had never seen the medical staff look so worried. He could hear the constant hum of transport ships docking and the soft announcements calling for more medical teams to report to the emergency bays. Something big was happening, and from the grim faces he saw in the corridors, it was not good news. He grabbed his tool bag and headed toward the central medical bay to check on the atmospheric controls there. The station's life support systems were working overtime to handle the massive influx of patients, and Jake wanted to make sure everything stayed running smoothly. As he walked through the corridor, he passed dozens of alien medical workers rushing between rooms with equipment and supplies. Their faces showed the same expression he had seen on human doctors during emergencies back on Earth, and it made his stomach feel tight with worry. The medical bay doors slid open, and Jake stepped into chaos. Beds filled every available space, and more patients lay on stretchers in the hallways. The air buzzed with the sound of medical equipment and the soft voices of doctors, speaking in a dozen different alien languages. Jake had never seen so many different species in one place before, and under different circumstances he would have found it fascinating. Now he just felt overwhelmed by the scope of whatever disaster was unfolding. Dr. HFY noticed the human engineer checking the environmental controls near the main treatment area and walked over to him. The Caltharian doctor had worked with humans before and found them to be reliable if somewhat primitive in their understanding of advanced medicine. This human seemed different, though, as he moved through the medical bay without showing any of the fear or disgust that most species displayed when confronted with so much suffering. "Engineer Morrison," Dr. HFY said in carefully pronounced English, "you should not be in this area without protective equipment. The Crimson Decay spreads through direct contact and airborne particles." Jake looked up from the control panel. He was examining and shrugged. "I need to make sure these systems keep working, or everyone in here dies anyway. Besides, I feel fine, and I have been in here for 20 minutes already." The doctor's large black eyes widened with alarm. 20 minutes of exposure should have been enough to infect any known species with the deadly disease. He pulled out his medical scanner and ran it over Jake's body, expecting to see the early signs of cellular breakdown that marked the beginning of the Crimson Decay. Instead, the scanner showed perfectly normal human biological readings with no trace of infection or even exposure to the pathogen. "This is impossible. Dr. Zexhai muttered as he ran the scanner over Jake 3 more times. You have been exposed to concentrated levels of the pathogen, but show no signs of infection. How do you feel? Jake finished adjusting the atmospheric controls and turned to face the alien doctor. I feel fine. A little tired from working double shifts, but nothing unusual. Why, what is supposed to happen? Dr. Zexhai explained the symptoms of the crimson decay and watched Jake's face grow serious as he understood the implications. A disease that could kill 17 different alien species within days had no effect on humans whatsoever. Either Jake was incredibly lucky, or humans possessed some natural immunity that no other known species had developed. Would you be willing to undergo some medical tests? Dr. Zexhai asked. If humans are naturally immune to this disease, it could help us understand how to treat the other species. Jake nodded without hesitation. He had seen enough suffering in the medical bay to know that any chance to help was worth taking. Whatever you need, Doc, just tell me what to do. Dr. Zexhai led Jake to a private examination room and began running every medical test in his considerable arsenal. Blood samples, tissue samples, brain scans, and genetic analysis all showed the same impossible result. Jake Morrison was not just immune to the crimson decay, but his body seemed to actively repel the pathogen as if some natural defense system was destroying it on contact. News of the immune human spread quickly through the medical staff, and soon Dr. Valtara arrived to assist with the testing. The female Caltharian specialist in xenobiology had studied dozens of different alien species, but had never encountered anything like Jake's natural resistance to such a deadly pathogen. His immune system is remarkable, she told Dr. Zexhai. They reviewed the test results. Humans evolved on a planet with an incredibly hostile environment, and their bodies developed defenses we have never seen before. This immunity might be the key to saving everyone. Outside the examination room, the crimson decay continued its deadly work as more ships arrived with more dying passengers. The morgues were full, the crematoriums were running constantly, and the medical staff worked around the clock, trying to slow down a disease they could not stop. But in one small room, 2 alien doctors studied the blood of a human engineer and began to hope that maybe, just maybe, they had found the answer to the worst pandemic in galactic history. Dr. Zexhai stared at the microscopic images on his screen and blinked all 4 of his eyes in disbelief. After 3 days of intensive testing, Jake Morrison's saliva contained something that no other known species possessed: a complex enzyme compound that seemed to hunt down and destroy the crimson decay pathogen like tiny molecular warriors. The enzyme attacked the disease at its core and broke it apart before it could damage healthy cells. Jake sat patiently in the examination chair while Dr. Valtara collected another saliva sample. He had been providing blood tissue and fluid samples for 72 hours straight and was starting to feel like a living laboratory. The 2 Caltharian doctors worked with focused intensity that reminded him of human scientists during major breakthroughs. Their excitement was obvious even through their alien features, and Jake began to hope they had found something important. The enzyme structure is unlike anything in our medical databases, Dr. Valtara explained to her colleague as she loaded the fresh sample into the analyzer. It appears to be a natural defense mechanism that humans developed through millions of years of fighting diseases on their home planet. Earth must have been an incredibly hostile environment to produce such robust immune systems. Dr. Zexhai nodded as he watched the enzyme compound systematically destroy sample after sample of the crimson decay pathogen. Humans had evolved on a world where deadly microorganisms were common threats, and their bodies had developed defenses that more advanced civilizations had never needed. The irony was remarkable. The newest and supposedly most primitive species in the galactic community possessed the key to defeating the worst pandemic in recorded history. Lisa Chun arrived at Sanctuary 7 aboard the research vessel Discovery. Just as the medical team was preparing to test Jake's saliva on actual patients. The human biochemist had been studying alien diseases for the past 2 years, and her expertise in cross-species biology made her the perfect person to help understand the mechanism behind Jake's immunity. She brought with her a portable laboratory and years of experience studying how human biology interacted with alien pathogens. The enzyme compound is incredible, Lisa said as she examined Dr. Zexhi's research data. Humans produce this naturally because our evolutionary history includes constant exposure to viruses, bacteria, parasites, and fungi. Our immune systems had to become incredibly sophisticated just to survive on Earth. Most alien species evolved in much cleaner environments and never developed these kinds of defenses. The first test patient was a young Volak merchant who had been infected for 2 days and was already showing severe symptoms. The crimson decay had spread across 30% of his body, and his cellular structure was beginning to break down. Dr. Zexhi carefully administered a small dose of processed human saliva directly into the patient's bloodstream and waited to see what would happen. Within 20 minutes, the red discoloration began to fade from the patient's skin. Within an hour, the cellular breakdown had stopped completely, and new healthy tissue was beginning to form where the disease had caused damage. By the end of the day, the Vorlak merchant was sitting up in bed, asking for food, and wondering why everyone was staring at him with such amazement. "It works," Dr. Veltara whispered as she recorded the patient's remarkable recovery. Human saliva actually cures the crimson decay. Word of the successful treatment spread through the medical station like wildfire. Within hours, dozens of patients were lining up to receive doses of Jake's saliva. The results were consistent and dramatic. Patients who had been dying just hours before were making full recoveries and showing no lasting effects from their infection. The cure worked on every species they tested and seemed to have no negative side effects. Jake found himself spending 12 hours a day in the medical bay, providing saliva samples for processing. The station's biochemical laboratory worked around the clock to purify and concentrate his donations into doses that could be administered safely to alien patients. Each dose required careful preparation to ensure the enzyme compound remained stable and effective. The treatment requires multiple daily doses to maintain effectiveness, Lisa explained to the medical team during their daily briefing. The enzyme compound is very powerful, but it breaks down quickly in alien bloodstreams. Patients need a dose every 4 to 6 hours for at least 3 days to ensure complete elimination of the pathogen. The demand for the cure quickly outpaced what Jake could provide alone. Even working at maximum capacity, he could only produce enough saliva to treat about 50 patients per day. More than 3,000 infected beings were currently on the station, and thousands more were arriving on transport ships every few hours. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. They needed more human donors, and they needed them immediately. Dr. Zexhi sent an urgent message to the Galactic Health Council explaining the situation. Humans were naturally immune to the crimson decay, and their saliva contained a compound that could cure infected patients. The galaxy needed every available human to volunteer as a donor to help save the billions of alien lives at risk from the spreading pandemic. The response from the galactic government was swift and decisive. Emergency protocols were activated, and every human in known space was contacted with a request to volunteer as a medical donor. Transport ships were dispatched to human colonies and Earth itself to collect volunteers and bring them to treatment centers throughout the galaxy. Jake watched the first group of human volunteers arrive at Sanctuary 7 and felt a mixture of pride and relief. Teachers, farmers, engineers, students, and retirees had all answered the call to help save alien species they had never met. They came from every human settlement in known space and brought with them the same determination that had helped humanity survive on their hostile home world. "Your species is remarkable," Dr. Zexhai told Jake as they watched the volunteers organizing themselves into shifts to maximize their donation efficiency. Most civilizations would demand payment or political concessions for such assistance. Humans simply showed up and asked how they could help. Lisa worked with the new arrivals to establish proper collection and processing procedures. Each volunteer would need to provide saliva samples 5 times per day to maintain adequate supplies. For the growing number of patients, the human biochemist created detailed schedules to ensure continuous production while giving each donor adequate rest periods. The medical breakthrough had solved the immediate problem of how to cure the crimson decay, but it had also created new challenges. The logistics of collecting, processing, and distributing human saliva across dozens of star systems would require unprecedented cooperation between species. Transport networks needed to be restructured, quarantine procedures had to be updated, and thousands of alien medical workers needed to be trained in the new treatment protocols. Jake continued his work as the primary test subject while the volunteer donors began their life-saving routine. He watched alien patients make miraculous recoveries and saw hope return to the faces of the medical staff, who had been fighting a losing battle for weeks. The cure was working, and humanity had become the unlikely savior of galactic civilization. Outside the medical station, the pandemic continued to rage across the galaxy, but now there was hope. Human saliva, the most basic and humble of bodily fluids, had become the most precious substance in known space. The newest members of the galactic community had proven that sometimes the most advanced civilizations needed help from those they considered primitive. Evolution had given humans exactly what the galaxy needed in its darkest hour. Admiral Patricia Brooks stood before the largest holographic display in Earth's orbital command center and tried to comprehend the scope of what the Galactic Medical Authority was asking humanity to do. The numbers floating in the air around her told a story of unprecedented crisis. 47 billion infected beings across 132 worlds needed treatment with human saliva 5 times per day for at least 3 days. The mathematical requirements were staggering and would demand the largest mobilization in human history. "They need 12,000 volunteers minimum," said her aide captain Martinez as he highlighted the critical supply routes on the galactic map. "That's just to cover the most severely affected systems. If we want to actually get ahead of this pandemic, we need at least 20,000 people willing to spend the next 6 months traveling between alien worlds donating saliva." Patricia nodded grimly as she studied the logistics reports streaming in from across human space. Every colony, every settlement, and every space station had already been contacted, and the response had been overwhelming. More than 50,000 humans had volunteered to join the medical mission, despite the risks and hardships involved. Teachers were leaving their classrooms, farmers were abandoning their crops, and families were saying goodbye to loved ones who might not return for months. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone in the command center. Just 30 years ago, humanity had been a single-planet species struggling to achieve basic spaceflight. Now the advanced alien civilizations that had welcomed them into the galactic community were depending on human biology to save their entire civilization. Evolution had played a cosmic joke by giving the newest and supposedly most primitive species exactly what everyone else needed to survive. Captain Ryan Torres received his mission orders while his ship, the Salvation, was still being loaded with specialized medical equipment. His crew of 400 volunteers included doctors, teachers, mechanics, students, and retirees who had all answered the call to help save alien lives. The ship's cargo holds had been converted into mobile saliva processing laboratories that could produce thousands of doses per day once they reached their assigned systems. "Our first stop is the Centauri Medical Complex," Ryan announced to his crew during their departure briefing. They have over 2 million infected patients from 16 different species, and their supply of processed human saliva runs out in 18 hours. We need to establish full production capacity within 12 hours of arrival, or people are going to start dying again. The Salvation was one of 50 ships carrying human volunteers to crisis zones throughout the galaxy. Each vessel had been equipped with the latest processing equipment designed by Lisa Chun and her team at Sanctuary 7. The technology could extract, purify, and concentrate the life-saving enzyme compound from human saliva while maintaining its effectiveness for up to 72 hours. Ryan watched Earth shrink in the rear displays as his ship entered hyperspace and wondered if he would ever see his home planet again. The mission briefings had been clear about the risks involved. Humans would be working in environments with deadly pathogens alongside alien species they had never encountered before. Some volunteers might become infected with diseases that human medicine could not cure, and others might face hostility from alien populations who resented their dependence on human assistance. News of the human medical mission spread quickly through alien communication networks, and the reactions were mixed. Many species expressed gratitude and amazement that humanity would mobilize so completely to help others. The Caltharian government issued official statements praising human generosity and calling for all species to support the relief effort. The Vorlic Confederacy opened their borders to human medical ships and offered free passage through their territory. Other reactions were less positive. The militant hegemony faction that controlled several outer rim systems began spreading propaganda, claiming that humans had engineered the Crimson Decay as a weapon to make themselves indispensable to galactic civilization. Their broadcasts accused humanity of biological warfare and called for armed resistance against the medical mission. Security reports indicated that some hegemony worlds were refusing to allow human ships to dock even as their populations died from the spreading pandemic. Intel suggests the hegemony is planning direct action against our medical convoys, reported Colonel Hayes during Ryan's daily security briefing. They believe this is all part of some elaborate human conspiracy to take over the galaxy. Their logic is that the timing is too convenient and that no species could be naturally immune to such a deadly pathogen. Ryan understood the paranoia, even if he found it frustrating. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for less than a generation, and many alien species still viewed them with suspicion. The idea that primitive humans possessed biological capabilities that advanced civilizations lacked challenged fundamental assumptions about evolution and technological progress. Some species found it easier to believe in conspiracy theories than to accept that they needed help from their newest neighbors, that the Salvation arrived at Centauri Medical Complex to find controlled chaos. Dozens of alien medical ships were docked at the massive facility, and emergency shuttles were constantly arriving with new patients. The complex's administrator, Dr. Krextow, greeted Ryan personally and escorted him through wards filled with dying beings from species the human captain had never seen before. We have been rationing our remaining doses of processed human saliva, Dr. Krextow explained as they walked through a ward filled with infected children from the crystalline Nexari species. Each patient receives 1 dose per day instead of the recommended 5. It slows the disease, but does not cure it. Without your assistance, these patients will all be dead within a week. Ryan's volunteers immediately began setting up their processing equipment while the ship's medical team worked with alien doctors to establish treatment protocols. The sight of suffering children from any species was heartbreaking, and the human crew worked with desperate efficiency to begin producing the life-saving doses needed to cure them. Within 6 hours, the Salvation's mobile laboratory was producing 15,000 doses per day, and alien medical teams were beginning to administer proper treatment schedules to their patients. Ryan watched a young Nexari child's crystalline skin clear of the deadly red discoloration and felt the same pride he had experienced when his own daughter recovered from illness years earlier. Universal empathy, it seemed, was another human trait. That served the galaxy well. The success at Centauri Medical Complex was repeated across dozens of systems as human medical ships arrived and began full-scale treatment programs. Worlds that had been preparing for extinction were suddenly reporting dramatic decreases in infection rates and miraculous recoveries among patients who had been given up for dead. The human volunteers worked 18-hour shifts to maximize their saliva production, while alien medical teams marveled at their dedication and stamina. "The humans work harder than any species we have encountered," reported Dr. Veltara during her weekly update to the Galactic Health Council. "They seem to view this mission as a personal obligation rather than a professional duty. Many volunteers are donating beyond recommended limits and requiring medical intervention to prevent exhaustion." News of the mission's success began to change alien attitudes toward humanity. Species that had previously viewed humans as primitive, newcomers started to recognize the unique strengths that came from evolving on such a harsh world. The same evolutionary pressures that had given humans their robust immune systems had also created a culture that valued sacrifice, cooperation, and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The hegemony faction's propaganda campaign began to lose effectiveness as more worlds witnessed human medical teams working around the clock to save alien lives. It became difficult to maintain conspiracy theories when human volunteers were literally exhausting themselves to help others. Public opinion in hegemony territory began to shift as infected populations demanded access to the human treatment programs. Ryan received reports from across the galaxy indicating that the mission was succeeding beyond all expectations. Human volunteers were not just providing medical assistance, but were also serving as informal ambassadors who demonstrated the best qualities of their species. Alien populations who had never interacted with humans before were impressed by their work ethic, compassion, and willingness to sacrifice for others. The Salvation continued its mission from system to system, establishing treatment centers and training alien medical teams in proper dosage procedures. Ryan's crew had become a well-oiled machine that could set up a full processing laboratory in any environment within hours of arrival. They worked with dozens of different alien species and learned to adapt their procedures to accommodate various biological requirements. As the third month of the mission began, Ryan realized that humanity had fundamentally changed its relationship with the rest of the galaxy. They were no longer the newest and least advanced members of galactic civilization, but had become essential partners in the greatest humanitarian effort in recorded history. The Crimson Decay pandemic was being defeated not by advanced technology or superior medicine, but Nurse Helen Murphy had trained Vorlic medics on 17 different worlds and was starting to understand that teaching alien doctors proper dosage administration was more complex than anyone had anticipated. Each species processed the human enzyme compound differently, and what worked perfectly for Caltharians could be fatal for Nixari patients. She stood in the medical bay of the orbital treatment facility above Kepler-7 and watched her latest group of students practice the delicate art of cross-species medicine. The crystalline species need twice the concentration, but half the frequency, Helen explained to the young Vorlic doctor who was struggling with the dosage calculations. Their silicon-based biology processes the enzyme compound more slowly than carbon-based life forms. If you give them too much too often, their cellular matrices will destabilize and they will die from the cure instead of the disease. The Vorlic doctor nodded solemnly and made careful notes in his medical records. Helen had learned that alien medical education was much more theoretical than human training, and many alien doctors had never dealt with the kind of hands-on crisis medicine that humans took for granted. Their advanced technology usually handled most medical problems automatically, but the Crimson Decay required the kind of Intuitive treatment decisions that only came from experience with unpredictable situations. Sam Rodriguez crawled out from under a crystalline medical scanner that had been modified to work with human biological samples and wiped the strange blue lubricant from his hands. The mechanical engineer had spent the past 4 months adapting alien medical equipment to handle the processing and distribution of human saliva. Every species used different technology, and every world required custom modifications to make their systems compatible with the life-saving human enzyme compound. The Nexari equipment is incredibly advanced, but it was never designed to handle organic compounds this complex, Sam explained to his alien counterpart who was observing the modification process with fascination. Your people have been using synthetic medicines for so long that your medical technology can't process natural biological substances. We have to rebuild the molecular analyzers from scratch to handle human saliva. The crystalline engineer, whose name Sam could not pronounce, made a sound that might have been laughter. Your species creates solutions using such primitive tools and methods. We have been trying to modify this equipment for weeks using our most advanced computational systems. You accomplished more in 6 hours using manual tools and trial and error. Sam shrugged and picked up his next piece of equipment. Human engineering had always been based on practical problem-solving rather than theoretical perfection. When something did not work, humans tried different approaches until they found one that did. It was not elegant or sophisticated, but it was effective. And that was what mattered when lives were at stake. The treatment program was revealing unexpected aspects of human nature that impressed alien observers throughout the galaxy. Dr. Zexhai had documented dozens of cases where human volunteers worked themselves to exhaustion rather than allow alien patients to suffer. The medical staff at Sanctuary 7 had to implement mandatory rest periods to prevent humans from donating saliva to the point of dehydration and collapse. Subject volunteer Andrew Clark donated saliva for 14 consecutive hours yesterday. Despite showing signs of severe dehydration, Dr. Zexhai noted in his daily report to the Galactic Health Council. When medical staff attempted to intervene, he insisted that alien patients needed the doses more than he needed rest. This level of self-sacrifice appears to be common among human volunteers and suggests a cultural emphasis on service to others that we have not observed in other species. The dedication of human volunteers was creating bonds between species that had never existed before. Alien patients who recovered from the Crimson Decay often remained in contact with the human donors who had saved their lives. Cultural exchange programs were developing spontaneously as grateful alien families invited human medical workers to visit their worlds and learn about their societies. Helen received daily messages from former patients across the galaxy thanking her for saving their lives and those of their families. A young Nixari engineer named Zexco had named his newborn daughter Helen in honor of the human nurse who had saved his wife during the pandemic. The gesture had moved Helen to tears and reminded her why she had volunteered for the mission in the first place. Opposition to the human medical mission was becoming harder to maintain as more worlds witnessed the results firsthand. The hegemony faction's propaganda campaign claimed that humans were using biological warfare to make themselves indispensable, but their arguments lost credibility when human volunteers risked their lives to save hegemony citizens who had been abandoned by their own government. Lieutenant Kate Stevens and her security team had protected human medical workers on 12 different worlds and had seen the opposition movement lose support as the pandemic was brought under control. The militant groups that had initially threatened human volunteers were finding it difficult to recruit new members when their own families were being saved by human medicine. The anti-human sentiment is collapsing, Kate reported during her weekly briefing to Admiral Brooks. It's hard to maintain conspiracy theories when human medics are working 20-hour shifts to save your children. Public opinion has shifted dramatically in favor of the human mission, and several hegemony worlds are now requesting full treatment programs. The logistics of the medical mission required constant innovation and adaptation as human teams encountered new challenges on each world they visited. Transport ships had to be reconfigured to handle different atmospheric requirements. Processing equipment needed to be modified for various gravity levels, and medical protocols had to be adjusted for species with radically different biology. Captain Ryan Torres had overseen the establishment of treatment centers on 43 worlds and had learned that successful medical missions required more than just medical expertise. His crews served as diplomats, engineers, teachers, and cultural ambassadors, while also providing the life-saving saliva that kept the treatment programs running. The mission had become a comprehensive demonstration of human adaptability and resourcefulness. "We are not just delivering medicine," Ryan explained to his crew during their monthly briefing. "We are showing the galaxy what humanity can contribute beyond just our biological immunity. Every problem we solve and every challenge we overcome demonstrates that humans deserve a place at the table when galactic decisions are made." The enzyme compound in human saliva continued to prove effective against the crimson decay, but researchers were discovering that it had other applications as well. Lisa Chon and her team had identified several other alien diseases that responded to treatment with processed human saliva. Conditions that had plagued various species for centuries were suddenly curable using compounds that humans produced naturally. "Human biology is like a living pharmacy," Dr. Veltara observed during a joint research session with Lisa Chun. "Your immune systems produce dozens of compounds that have therapeutic effects on alien physiology. We are barely beginning to understand the medical potential of human biological systems." The research discoveries were adding new dimensions to the medical mission as human volunteers found themselves treating diseases beyond the original Crimson Decay pandemic. Ancient ailments that had been considered incurable were responding to human enzyme compounds, and entire alien medical systems were being revolutionized by the introduction of human biological materials. Helen watched elderly Caltharian patient walk out of the medical center completely cured of a degenerative condition that had confined him to a wheelchair for 20 years. The man's recovery was due to a secondary enzyme in human saliva that had never been studied before the current crisis. The discovery was opening new fields of research and suggesting that human biological systems might be the key to solving medical problems throughout the galaxy. The success of the medical mission was changing how alien species viewed humanity, but it was also changing how humans saw themselves. Volunteers who had expected to spend 6 months donating saliva were becoming permanent ambassadors and researchers who were helping to reshape galactic medicine. The mission that had started as emergency relief was evolving into a fundamental change in the relationship between humans and the rest of galactic civilization. Sam finished installing the last modified component in the Nexari medical scanner and stepped back to admire his work. The machine that had been designed by one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy was now running software that he had written using human programming techniques. The fusion of alien technology and human innovation was creating medical capabilities that neither species could have achieved alone. "Your people have a gift for making things work," his crystalline colleague observed as they tested the newly modified scanner. "We create perfect theoretical solutions that often fail in practical applications. Humans create imperfect practical solutions that somehow work better than our perfect theories." Helen smiled as she watched her latest group of alien medical students successfully treat their first patients using proper human enzyme therapy. Dr. Zexhai stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Health Council and delivered the words that officially marked the end of the greatest pandemic in recorded history. The Crimson Decay had been declared completely eradicated from all known systems, and the final statistics were staggering, even to those who had lived through the crisis. Human volunteers had donated over 40 billion individual doses of processed saliva and saved an estimated 2 trillion alien lives across 163 worlds. The pandemic response required the complete restructuring of interstellar logistics and created permanent bonds between species that had never cooperated before, Dr. Zexhai announced to the assembled delegates. The effort could not have succeeded without the unprecedented dedication of human volunteers who worked tirelessly for 8 months to save lives across the galaxy. Jake Morrison sat in the observer section and listened to the formal conclusion of the mission that had changed his life forever. The human engineer who had been the first to demonstrate immunity to the crimson decay was now recognized as one of the most important individuals in galactic history. His willingness to undergo extensive testing and donate countless saliva samples had provided the foundation for understanding human biological capabilities. The statistics from the pandemic response were remarkable in their scope and complexity. Human volunteers had traveled to every inhabited system in known space and established treatment centers on worlds where no human had ever set foot before. The logistics network created to support the medical mission had become the largest cooperative effort between species in galactic history and had required the coordination of resources from dozens of different civilizations. Admiral Patricia Brooks reviewed the final mission reports from her office overlooking Earth's rebuilt orbital shipyards. The facilities that had once produced exploration vessels were now manufacturing specialized medical equipment designed through collaboration between human and alien engineers. The pandemic response had created technological innovations that were revolutionizing medicine throughout the galaxy and establishing Earth as a center for advanced biological research. The mission exceeded every expectation we had when it began, Patricia reported to the assembled representatives of Earth's government. Our volunteers not only saved trillions of alien lives, but also demonstrated capabilities that have fundamentally changed how humanity is viewed by the rest of galactic civilization. Captain Ryan Torres had been promoted to admiral and now oversaw a network of permanent human medical stations throughout the galaxy. The emergency response that had started with 50 transport ships carrying volunteers had evolved into a comprehensive medical infrastructure that served as humanity's greatest contribution to galactic society. The stations continued to produce processed human saliva for ongoing treatment programs, while also conducting research into new medical applications for human biological compounds. The research discoveries made during the pandemic had revolutionized galactic medicine and opened entirely new fields of study. Dr. Veltara published the definitive analysis of human immune capabilities, and the paper became the most widely cited scientific work in galactic history. Universities throughout known space were establishing departments of human biology and xenomedicine to study the remarkable defensive systems that evolution had created on Earth. Human immune systems represent the most sophisticated biological defense network we have ever encountered, Dr. Veltara concluded in her landmark paper. The hostile environment of Earth created evolutionary pressures that forced the development of capabilities we never knew were possible. Every human carries within their biology the potential solutions to medical problems we thought were unsolvable. Lisa Chun had become the director of the Galactic Institute for Biological Research and was leading a team of human and alien scientists in studying the medical applications of compounds found in human biological systems. Her laboratory had identified over 200 different human enzymes and proteins that had therapeutic effects on various alien species. Diseases that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia were being cured using substances that humans produced naturally. The social impact of the medical mission was as significant as the scientific discoveries. Species that had never interacted Before were now working together on joint research projects and cultural exchange programs. The bonds formed between human volunteers and the alien